Welcome to Heath Riles Barbecue. On today's episode of Shooting the Q, we're going to be knocking out a cowboy bone-in ribeye that I picked up from my local Kroger store. It's 3.25 pounds, so you know it's going to be good. Let's get started. Now that we've got our steak dried off out of the pack, really the only thing we want to do is check, and we've got a little bit of hard fat right around here on the spinalis. I'm going to go ahead and take some of that off and just trim a little bit of that where you get down to the meat. Some of that hard fat's not going to cook through, so you want to be sure that you get some of this sinew off right here, some of this fat. Just kind of trim around. You don't want to take a lot off, because usually when you have some fat, it's holding these muscles together in this steak. So I don't want to cut some of that off, because that's really holding this eye of this ribeye to the tail of it here. Yeah, once we get that trimmed, I think we'll call it a day. The first thing that I want to do is go ahead and get a little bit of olive oil on this steak. So I'm not going to put much, just a little bit. Make sure you rub it in real good. On the other side, do the same thing. So I'm going to first start with some of my salt, pepper, garlic. It's got a few other things in it, onion powder and whatnot. You can go pretty heavy on this if you want to. It's not going to hurt nothing. This is such a big piece of meat, you got to think you're going to slice it down. This thing's almost the size of a roast, over 3 pounds. And now once I've got that all seasoned in, I'm going to come back with some of my good buddy Malcolm Reed's TX rub. I really like the coarseness of it, especially on a big cut of meat like this. He done a heck of a job with this one here. We also sell it online on my store, and of course you can get it on howtobarbecueright.com too. So you just want to put that salt and pepper on that steak pretty good and season it just like I did the other. Literally all over. Really good coat with that pepper. I love that good pepper note on a big cut of beef. Now, I'm going to do this process a little bit differently. I'm going to sear it off first and then move it over to the cool zone of the grill to finish cooking. All right, we'll be back in just a second. All right, we've got our PK grill set up for a 2-zone fire. So what I mean by that is we have all our roll oak charcoal on one side, and we've got a cool zone on the other we can shift that steak to once we get the color that we want. So the first thing I want to do, I've already sprayed my grates here with a little bit of spray, a little bit of oil. I'm just going to go in here and start turning and burning. Now, I don't have any certain time on this steak or anything like that. I'm just going to cook it till it's done. And that's the biggest thing with a big cut of meat like this. I'm trying to sear this steak off, trying to get some color on it, and I'm going to move it over to finish off and get it around that 120 to 125 temp, somewhere up in there. Any of that's fine to me, so I know it'll turn out a good medium rare. So you really want to set your timer for about 1.5 minutes and just keep flipping and rotating and flipping and rotating until you get the color you want, and move it over to the cool zone of the fire. Now, it's been about 6 to 7 minutes, and you can see that our steak has got the color that we want. So I've put my chef's alarm in it. I've set it to 120 degrees. I moved it over to the cool zone of my fire, and guess what? I'm just gonna leave it alone till the alarm goes off. I'm gonna make it easy, and then I'm gonna let it rest. So let's shut the grill lid, and I'll let you know how much time it takes. We'll be back. You can hear our alarm is going off, and what's that mean? Steak's done. Wow. Wow. This thing is beautiful. I want you to look at that right there. That right there is what you call a piece of perfection. All right, our steak is off of our PK grill. On time, it had a total cook time of about 35 minutes. So we seared it off for anywhere between 6 to 8 minutes. I think it was a little over 7, to be honest. And then all we did was move it to the cool zone, stick our chef's alarm in it, set it to 120 degrees, and then I pulled it when it hit 120. Now the only thing left to do, I'm gonna take some good salted sweet cream butter, and I'm gonna lay up on top of this steak to melt in. And then, what am I gonna do? Wrap this thing up, let it wait for at least 15 minutes, and then we'll slice into it. As you can see, our 3.25 pound bone-in cowboy ribeye turned out beautiful off the PK grill. It's got a nice crust on it, that butter melted in there. It's got that nice wet look. We used Malcolm's TX rub with Killer Hogs here, good friend of mine, and my everyday rub. We season pretty heavy, and that's where you see those good pepper notes on here. I can't wait to get in there and taste this thing. So without further ado, let's slice this thing off the bone. Let's slice it up, fan it out, and dig one of those good pieces out of there. So let's get to slicing this thing. Now that I've got this steak sliced up, it's time to get down to business. And you know what that means, don't you? That melted butter and that pan juice that come out of that steak right there, we most definitely need to drip that back over that steak right there and just drizzle over it. Ooh, Lord have mercy. Somebody might ought to go ahead and call the paramedics. And then you got to hit a little bit of salt pop down on it like that. And then it's ready to eat. It's just that simple. So I'm gonna move this bone out of the way. This steak was cooked beautifully on our PK grill. And I'm gonna have to cut me a little old bite out of here. Get me a good center point. Get me some of that juice right there and that. Look at that dripping off there. The natural char and flavor from that steak coming off the coarse salt and pepper out of the TX rub of Malcolm's. The good garlic, salt, and pepper notes coming out of my rub. The extra salt pop on top of that big piece of meat. The butter resting, everything worked together just beautifully on this steak. Remember, if you like what we're doing on our videos, be sure to like, subscribe, follow, share it with your friends. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. We'll see you next week.